Greetings metalheads and welcome to No Nonsense Metal Reviews. I'm George and today we have another instalment of Worst to First, the album rankings of American nu metal heavyweights Disturbed. Now, nu metal and Disturbed, definitely not everyone's cup of tea. I completely appreciate that. I myself, and I've gone on record to say this numerous times now, I myself am not a nu metal fan. I really just cannot get into it, but there are a couple of bands, mainly Disturbed and Slipknot, and I think Soulfly at the very beginning of their career. There's some bands that I do like, and those are the bands that they do seem to be right on the cusp of, is it nu metal or isn't it, or is it just groove metal? And also, in the case of Slipknot and Soulfly, they worked their way out of that scene. They became something completely different. Slipknot still show flourishes of nu metal here and there, but overall, it's just an extreme metal band. But Disturbed are probably the exception to the rule. I just can't get into the likes of Limp Bizkit and Korn and Cold Chamber. I've tried, but the only band that I really have been able to connect with that is undeniably a nu metal band is Disturbed. Now, 8 albums since 2000. I think that was the year of the release of their debut album. 8 albums to their name, which is actually quite surprising because I thought for whatever reason they had more than that. But 8 albums, that has seen them just rocket up those festival lineups and become one of the biggest and most successful bands, not just of nu metal, but in modern metal in general. So today I'm going to be ranking the albums based entirely on my own opinion. This is my own opinion, my choice. I completely understand if other fans out there would rank some albums slightly higher than others, or disagree completely, or agree. Feel free to agree with my album rankings. But for me, this has been quite a difficult one because when I got into Disturbed, and that must have been around the time of the Indestructible album, just when that was released, they were such a hugely important band to me. I was very much into Slipknot. They were my first musical love, and also Avenged Sevenfold and Bullet for My Valentine. So you get the idea. It was a lot of the very modern and very commercial, sort of more mainstream metal bands. But Disturbed really changed the game for me. I absolutely fell in love with Disturbed. I still do really enjoy Disturbed. I don't listen to them as much as I once did, but that's because my musical taste has grown, evolved. I've discovered other bands and more interest in more extreme metal, for example, or power metal. But I absolutely love some of these albums and some of these tracks. It's still, even now, years after I had first heard them, or in some cases, years since I last heard them, it really reminded me just how much of an impact this band had on me and how influential they were. So, without further delay, we'll kick off with my least favourite album, number 8. And it's an album that I have tried to get into and try to appreciate a bit more, but it's just lost on me a little bit. And I'm talking about Evolution. Now, this is the 2018 album, the second album post-hiatus. And I'm not going to say that it's a bad album, because it's not a bad album. It's a good album. It's just nowhere near as good as some of their other albums. And I just can't quite get into it. I think there's a few fundamental issues with this album. Namely that there are 3 slow, quiet, sort of ballad-esque tracks, which include A Reason to Fight, Hold On to Memories, and Already Gone. Now, those are good songs. David Draymond is a fantastic vocalist, and he can do the sort of more emotive and slower stuff really well. But for me, it just loses the pace totally. It's just a little bit too melancholic for my liking. But there are some good tracks on here. I was going to say No More, but that's a bit of a strange sort of groovy track. Not a huge fan of that. But the opening track, Are You Ready, isn't a bad song at all. Then we've got Stronger on Your Own. Savior of Nothing is probably the album highlight for me. And Watch You Burn isn't a bad track. But it just, to be honest, it's just a little bit of a deflating album, where you consider that when they came back from that hiatus, they were on pretty fine form. Before they went on hiatus, after the release of Asylum, they were on the best form of their career. But this just doesn't quite live up to that. So that's why Evolution is at number 8 for me. Not a terrible album, as I say, just not good enough. Not good enough. We know that they can do better. So number 7, it will probably come as no surprise, as I've said, that I'm not a massive nu metal fan. The most nu metal of all of the Disturbed albums. I'm going at number 7 with the debut from 2000. This is The Sickness. As I say, not a massive nu metal fan, and this is a very nu metal album. It's not a bad album at all. There are some really good material on here, some really good songs, such as Voices and The Game, that work perfectly together. Then we've got Stupefy, which is a nu metal classic. Then we've got Down with the Sickness, which is probably one of their most popular and one of their most successful songs. But for me, I just can't quite get into that track. It's sinister and creepy and menacing, but it's the sort of crazy ramble bit that we get halfway through the song, where it sounds like David is having an existential crisis. Just doesn't do it for me. But what I do like is tracks like Numb is another good one. Conflict. Not a massive fan of the cover of Shout 2000, nor am I a massive fan of Dropping Plates. It just loses it for me. So for me, this is it's a bit too nu metal, but I cannot expect any less from a very influential, very successful nu metal band. So number 7 for me has to be The Sickness. So back to the more recent stuff for number 6. I'm going with the comeback album, post hiatus, Immortalize. Now, this is a good album. There's no doubt about it. It's a good, strong album. I think it has some very good material on this, such as the title track, Immortalized. That's a very heavy song, very groovy, lots of crushingly heavy riffs there. Really enjoy that. The Vengeful One, which is a really good song, very, very memorable, lots of hooks in there. But it's a heavy song. It's one of the lead singles, I believe. In fact, it might have been the single that they released sort of to announce their return to the metal world. Then we've got Open Your Eyes, which is, again, it's a good song. Not quite as good as those first 2 tracks after the intro there. Then we've got The Light, which is an interesting song because it is a very uplifting, it's a very sunny and bright song. Perfectly titled The Light. It's very uplifting, it's very energizing, it's a nice listen. Then we've got What Are You Waiting For, which is, certainly a crowd pleaser. That's a motivational song. That's one to get you moving to. You're Mine, good song. Who, good song. But what you do notice with this album is that you've got those first sort of 4 or 5 tracks that are really strong, and then it loses a little bit of its momentum. It loses a little bit of the quality and consistency, in my opinion. With tracks like Save Our Last Goodbye, Fire It Up, which is a very weird one. You just don't expect a stoner tribute track from the likes of Disturbed. I never ever need or want to hear their cover of Simon and Garfunkel's The Sound of Silence ever again. It's one of the most overplayed, over-recommended songs ever. I know it's been a massive success for them, and I think that's brilliant that they've had such success with their slow, soppy cover song. But it's impossibly infuriating when someone, maybe a colleague or an acquaintance, finds out that you like heavy metal music, and they say, "Oh, yeah, do you like Disturbed? I really like the sound of silence." I have heard that probably about 3 or 4 times from different people in my life, and or since this album's release, and it bugs the hell out of me. So that alone is why it has to be number 6. But that aside, Never Wrong is a good song, and the closing track, Who Taught You How to Hate. Those are good tracks, but other than Immortalized, the Vengeful One, and maybe Open Your Eyes, there aren't that many really memorable tracks. But it's not a bad album. So I'm going with number 6, Immortalized. This was, of course, the comeback, as I say, from 2015. A strong album, just, again, not as good as some of the others. But now we're at number 5. We are going with the album before the hiatus. We're going with Asylum. Now, this album, for a lot of people, was a bit of a Marmite situation. A lot of people loved it, and there were a lot of people that didn't. There were a lot of detractors. But I am firmly in the camp of I do like this album a lot. I think this is a really strong album. The title track, Asylum, is a brilliant track. Some great riffs there, great guitar work from Dan Donegan. I think he's a fantastic guitarist. And, of course, David's vocals are great. Very memorable stuff on that Asylum track. The Infection, a personal favourite of mine. That's a very, very memorable track. It's got a lot of emotion there. It's very emotive. It's very strong. It's a great track. It's the perfect sort of track for an angsty hormonal teenager, which is exactly what I would have been at that time. Tracks like Warrior, Another Way to Die, Never Again. Those 3, I can kind of take it or leave it with those ones. They're good songs, but it's just not as good as some of the other material. A little bit less memorable, shall we say. The Animal, good song. A little bit kind of like creepy, a little bit spacey at times. Good track though. Crucified, that's a solid song, as is Serpentine. Another great track. Then we've got the very heavy metal Innocence that closes the album there. And it's a great track. So it's a strong album. It's certainly a strong album. It's a worthy follow-up to Indestructible, but it's not their best. But we get some great material. Certainly that title track, The Infection, Crucified, Serpentine. Those are highlights for me. So number 5, Asylum. Now things get a little bit more interesting. Now things get a little bit harder to place. But number 4, surprising for some people, I'm sure, I'm going with the newest album from 2022, Divisive. Now this album, if this had been the album that they'd released upon their return from their hiatus, I have no doubt that Disturbed would be in a massively higher position in the metal world. I think that they would be certainly a lot further along in their success, in their popularity, notoriety, because this album is an absolute stormer. It's not that long an album, just under 40 minutes long. It's actually a very streamlined album as well. It's not overly inflated. It hasn't got all the bells and whistles and attachments. It's just straightforward groove metal. Nu metal. It's certainly very, very groovy. Absolutely incredible tracks here, such as Hey You, very memorable, lots of hooks there. Bad Man, which was one of my favourite tracks, one of my top tracks of 2022, has such an infectious and memorable riff. Absolutely love that, just so much groove. The title track's a great track, as is Unstoppable, very memorable, full of groove. Love to Hate, a little bit more of a melodic edge with that one. Don't Tell Me, featuring Ann Wilson, is the ballad track, but it's still a good song. The closing 3 tracks, Take Back Your Life, Part of Me, and Won't Back Down, are fantastic. Heavy, very groovy, crushing riffs, absolutely love it. It's just a consistent run of 3 top-notch heavy tracks. Absolutely love it, especially Won't Back Down. That is heavy as hell, has a pretty crushing breakdown in there. It's just a brilliant album. Absolutely love this. So number 4, 2022, divisive, top-notch album. Now things really do get a bit more difficult with the final three. Number 3 had to be Indestructible. Probably their most successful album. It's the one that you tend to hear people talk about the most with regards to Disturbed, and it is an astonishingly good album. You've got that amazing title track there, Indestructible. You've got the very memorable and very hooky Inside the Fire. You've got Deceiver, nice heavy song. The Night, sinister, creepy. Perfect Insanity and Haunted, even creepier, but just brilliant tracks. It's all really original. It doesn't sound like its predecessors. It doesn't sound like anyone else. This is Disturbed in their absolutely definable style. Other great tracks for me, Criminal, that's a heavy, full of attitude track. And the closing track, Facade, another absolutely storming track. To be honest, overall, this is a really consistent album, start to finish. It's heavy, it's got plenty of groove. It's just a great, solid, modern metal album. Number 3, Indestructible. Now things got really difficult because these two albums, to be honest, depending on when you asked me, they may interchange. But for the purpose of this album ranking, my number 2 is The Mighty Believe. From 2002, I cannot overstate just how influential this album was to me when I first heard it, which was much later, of course. But I can tell you that tracks like Prayer and Awaken, Mistress and Remember, they were just the perfect soundtrack to my years at, would have been upper school. They were so important and so influential. It was therapy, musical therapy. Albums like this, along with albums like Volume 3 by Slipknot or the self-titled Avenged Sevenfold album, they were just massively important and they were hugely therapeutic for me. But I mentioned those great tracks there. This is far less nu metal than the first album. Although this is their second album, it sounds like a totally different band to what we had on The Sickness. Way less nu metal. There's, other than the track Liberate and the other track Intoxication, it's not very nu metal at all. David's vocal style had changed completely. It was much softer, far less rap orientated as well. But we've got some really, really strong material here. Bound is another good one, and Devour. Darkness, the closing track there, is a slow, almost ballad type piece, and that is one that I tend to skip, that last track. But the rest, it's heavy. Certainly Prayer and Remember, we've got some crushing riff work there, absolutely brilliant. So full of groove, so full of just crushing awesomeness. Absolutely love it. And I still frequently revisit this album, actually. It's just a top-notch album. So number 2, Believe. So that leaves only one other choice. Number 1, for me, it was always going to be, if not Believe, then it was going to be 10,000 Fists. Absolute stormer of an album. 2005, I believe this was issued. Yeah, released in 2005. This is a masterpiece. Again, Disturbed have changed enormously in terms of their sound and style since Believe. This is the 3rd album and they sound fantastic. We've got much more of the nu metal leanings, but also just considerably far more groove metal orientated. Amazing tracks here. So many memorable, hooky tracks as well, such as the opening title track 10,000 Fists, crushingly heavy, absolutely beautiful. Just Stop, which features in their live sets still, well, certainly did last time I saw them, which was, oh goodness, last time they were here supporting Avenged Sevenfold, whenever that was, quite a few years ago now, I suspect. Then we've got Stricken, another great track, so memorable, lots of hooks. I'm Alive, which is a soaring track, so memorable. Then we've got Sons of Plunder, another brilliant track. Overburdened, personal favourite from this album for me. It's a slow burning, very dark, groovy, mournful piece, a little bit doomy. It's great, absolutely love it. Forgiven, Sacred Lie, Pain Redefined, Avarice, absolutely great tracks. Love it. If you'd never heard Disturbed, if you'd never given them a go, maybe you'd written them off because they're a new metal band and the association is there. It's almost a bit of a swear word, it's a bit of a curse word in the heavy music world. But if you've never heard them before, if you're going to check out one album, check out this album, 10,000 Fists. It's an absolute stormer. I think it's without a doubt one of the best new metal albums of all time. Not that I've heard that many, but it's incomparable. So there you have it. That is my ranking the albums of Disturbed. We'll go just recap in descending order. Number 1, 10,000 Fists. Number 2, we have Believe. Number 3, Indestructible. Number 4, we have Divisive. Number 5, Asylum. Number 6, Immortalized. Number 7, The Sickness. And number 8, Evolution. Not bad albums at all, those last albums there, but just not as good, nowhere near as good as the likes of Believe or 10,000 Fists. But there you have it. I will just throw in this honourable mention here, as this did actually feature in one of my early My Favourite Compilations episodes, The Lost Children. This is an absolutely fantastic B-sides and rarity compilation that contains some really astoundingly good tracks, such as Hell or Old Friend, Leave It Alone, Two Worlds, Mine. Great tracks, and that is certainly worth checking out. If you're not familiar with this one, definitely check it out. But if you're not familiar with Disturbed, I really would recommend just give it a try. Either Believe or 10,000 Fists. Give it a chance, you might be surprised. You may be pleasantly surprised. So what do you think of my album ranking, and how would you rank the studio albums of Disturbed? I'm very interested to know. Of course, as I said before, this is all my own opinion, so be gentle, but feel free to share your opinions as well. I'm interested to hear. Thank you very much for watching, my friends. As always, feel free to like and subscribe, and check back soon for more reviews and recommendations. Take care, my friends. Stay heavy.